You're listening to the Fibromyalgia podcast with Tami Stackelhouse, episode 35. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse. And in today's episode, I am going to be sharing with you one of my favorite energy management tools. We've all had those times where we're going along, we're doing fine, and all of a sudden you've done too much. We've all been there. And I'm going to share with you my favorite tool for making sure that doesn't happen. Before we get into that, I want to give today's listener shout out. This was actually a comment shared on my Facebook page by a friend of mine. So I want to give a shout out to Nancy, who said, "Thank you for everything you do. I have gotten my fibromyalgia mostly under control since I've been following your tips. I only get about 2 to 3 really bad flare-ups a year." Awesome. Thanks so much for listening, Nancy, and awesome to be able to share your message here on the podcast. So hi to you and your family. All right, you guys ready to learn a little bit about some energy management? I learned this trick the hard way, meaning the painful way, which means I did too much. I was in my very first couple of years being diagnosed with fibromyalgia. This is when things were really pretty bad for me. And my husband and my sister wanted to go golfing. And they invited me to go with them. And I knew there was no way, even on this tiny little 9-hole golf course, that I could walk the whole thing. I just knew I physically couldn't do it. But I thought it might be kind of nice to hang out with them. It might be nice to get outside in the sunshine. So I thought, okay, I'll go and I'll just drive the golf cart, right? So I went. That's exactly what I did. I drove the golf cart, and the next day I felt tired, but okay. The day after that, I totally crashed, and I was crashed out for a couple of days. I was in a lot more pain. I was exhausted, and I thought, what the heck? I just drove the golf cart. How could this be? Well, not too long before that, I had asked my husband for a pedometer for my birthday. This was clear back in 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. No, would have been probably earlier than that, probably 2007, 2006. And so I, for whatever reason, asked for a pedometer, got a pedometer. I was actually wearing it that day that I went golfing. I say that in quotes because I was just driving the golf cart, right? Well, I went back after I was all crashed out. I went and I looked at my pedometer, and I discovered that I had walked that day, even though I was, quote, driving the golf cart. I had actually walked about 3 times as much as a normal day. So it was obvious at that point why I was exhausted, why I was all crashed out on the couch, because I had done 3 times as much activity as a normal day. Of course I would be exhausted, right? So that was the moment where I learned that using a pedometer could actually help me manage my energy. And I wanted to give you guys some training on how to do this for yourself and a little bit of coaching on some of the things that might come up for you. So the first step, of course, is to have something that tracks your steps. I actually nowadays mostly just use my iPhone. Most of us have our phones on us all the time. So obviously it's not tracking steps if it's, sitting in your purse on the counter instead of in your pocket. So you do want to make sure you have it with you so it's tracking all of your steps. But you could also, wear a Fitbit, Jawbone Up. I've had clients use that. There's lots of different types of activity trackers you can use. And the point is to have one that you can look at and it will tell you where you're at right now with your steps. So at any given moment, you can look and see what your steps are. It's not helpful if you have one where you have to go look on your computer later. If you've got your phone and you can look on your phone, some of that can sometimes be helpful, but you need something that you can look at moment by moment to see exactly where you're at with your steps. The other thing it's super helpful to have is a way to see your average number of steps and a way to go back and look at your steps in the past, right? Like my tracker would not have been at all helpful if I hadn't been able to go back and see, oh, look at that. You did 3 times as many steps 2 days ago, right? So you've got to be able to go back. You've also got to be able to see what your average is so that you know what you're shooting for. And those you don't necessarily have to be able to see right there on the step tracker. Those are things you could go look at your computer on. But I know there's lots of activity trackers out there that look pretty, that don't have displays. I know there's rings, there's necklaces, things like that. You actually need to be able to see that number. So whether it syncs with your phone and you could look at your phone, or it actually displays on the device, you do need to know your current number of steps right then and there, but everything else you can look up on the computer. So that's what you need to have. And most of you probably have a smartphone that will track this for you. So most likely you do not need to go out and buy anything to start doing this. So the first step is just to track your normal number of steps. So if it's your phone, make sure you carry that around with you. If you have a fitness tracker you've been using, you can just go back and look at your history, right? If you haven't been consistently carrying it on your person to track every single step, then you might need to do that for a couple of weeks to see what your averages are. Don't try to do anything different. Just let it track your steps. After a couple of weeks, or if you've been already doing this, you can go back and look at your average number of steps. It will tell you what your average is per day. Now, I want to stop right here. A lot of my clients, when I tell them to do this, they get super embarrassed because they look at that number and they think about the 10,000 steps we are, supposed to get to be healthy, and they are nowhere near that number. And I want you to know, if you're listening to this and you're doing 10,000 steps and you feel great, awesome. That's probably a very small handful of you listening. Most of you, I would expect your average number of steps to be between 1,000 and 5,000, to be completely honest. I will tell you, when I did this, right, when I had this situation and I did too many steps, the number that was 3 times too many steps was 6,000 steps. So at that particular time, my average number of steps was only about 2,000. And I find this is very, very normal, very, very average for most people with fibromyalgia who are still struggling with their symptoms. Now, you may be able to walk more. You may have a job where you are always walking. I had a client who was a teacher. She was close to 10,000 steps most days, just because she was an elementary school teacher and she walked a lot, right? And that's totally possible. But most of you, I would expect to be closer to, like I said, 2,000 to 5,000, right? So look at that number and think about, how do you feel at that number of steps? So let's say you look at your average and it says 2,873 steps is your average. How do you feel at that number? Do you feel good? Are you in a lot of pain? Do you feel like you have the energy to do things when somebody needs something, or when you need to do something? Like if you spontaneously needed to go to the grocery store, would you have the energy to do it at that number of steps? Or does that number of steps use up all of your energy, where you are getting to the end of your day and you are crashed out on the couch because you've got absolutely nothing left. So you might remember in previous episodes, I've talked a lot about energy being important in healing and how we need to look at our energy like money, and we need to budget some of that energy towards our own healing. Counting your steps is a great way you can do that. So if you look at your number of steps, that 2873 average number of steps, and you're exhausted at the end of the day, you've given it all using those number of steps, then what you may need to do is figure out a way to have fewer steps so that you have a little bit of money to put towards your healing, a little bit of energy. Remember, energy budget, just like money. Put that energy budget towards your healing. We can't use it all if you want your body to have energy to get better, right? Now, I do realize that steps and energy are not always equal. I once did a trade show where I stood in one place, had not very many steps, and used a ton of energy. That can absolutely happen. But as a general sort of feel for, what you're doing, for most of us, we get up, we move around, we go upstairs to, feed the cat, go downstairs to do the laundry, whatever it might be. We're using steps to go out and do things. So in a lot of ways, steps and energy, it's a pretty easy way to get an overall idea. I'm going to use the term a gross idea, meaning overall big picture, not fine-grained detail, right? So it's a way to get a gross picture of your energy management. So start with your average. Think about, how do you feel at that average? If you feel great, maybe you could actually increase your steps. If you don't feel great, maybe you need to figure out ways to decrease your steps. And think about that average as being the number that your maximum, right? So for me, thinking about what happened with my going golfing, right? Going 6,000 steps, 3 times as much as my normal. That let me start to think about my normal number of steps. And at about 2,000 steps a day, I felt pretty good. My pain was mainly managed. I had energy left at the end of the day. I wasn't totally exhausted. I felt like I was making progress in my health goals when I was doing about 2,000 steps a day. If I went over that, I knew I was going to be exhausted. I was going to be in more pain. If I happened to do less than that, that was fine, right? So you're going to use your pedometer, your step tracker, your activity tracker in the opposite way of the way the whole rest of the world is using it, right? Everybody else looks at that number and thinks, I gotta get at least that many. You're going to look at it completely the opposite. You're going to look at that as your maximum amount you can spend for the day. If you go over that number of steps, you are going into debt and you will pay it with interest. Okay? So figure out what your average is, and it's totally okay if it's only 2,000 steps, if it's only 1,500 steps, if it's only 3,000 steps. If you're in the 4 digits, that's totally okay. That's where you start, right? No judgment on where you start. It's all about where we're going, right? So once you have your average, you know what number you feel good at, then we can start making choices based off of that number, right? So you start paying attention to how much certain activities cost you in terms of steps, right? So if you go to the grocery store, how many steps is that? I discovered if I went to Costco, it was going to be 500 to 1,000 steps, right? How many steps is it to go to the movies? How many steps is it to go out to dinner? How many steps is it to take something upstairs and come back downstairs rather than saving it and making one trip, right? How many steps is it to clean the house? How many steps is it to make dinner? How many steps is it to go to the doctor's office? And start thinking about what different things cost you in terms of steps. Remember, steps are our gross way of estimating energy and estimating how much energy you're spending, right? So how much energy does it take to do all of these things? And what does that equal in terms of steps? Once you have an idea of what things cost you, you can start making choices each day on how you want to spend your budget. So if you're one of those people who looks at your number of steps and you know you feel terrible and you know it's too many steps because you're using too much energy, once you get a feel for how much different things cost, maybe you're like, oh, it's like 200 steps every time I go upstairs to go put something away. I'm going to put a basket at the bottom of the stairs and save stuff up and only go upstairs once instead of 4 or 5 times a day, right? Or maybe in previous episodes, I've talked about how when I was really ill, I only left the house once a week. This was one of the things that went into that decision, was looking at the number of steps that I had per day and realizing if I went and did something multiple days, 5 days a week or whatever, then I had no steps for living my life. Right? For doing things with my family, for taking care of myself, for taking care of the house, right? So making sure I was budgeting my energy, budgeting my steps so that I was only spending big chunks of steps maybe once a week. It also makes it easier to decide. It gives you an objective way to decide whether or not you can or can't do something, right? So as I was learning this way of managing my energy by managing my steps, often it would happen that Scott would ask me if I wanted to go grocery shopping with him or wanted to go to Costco with him. And it used to be that I would think about that and think, oh, I don't know, how do I feel right now? If I go, will it put me over? And a lot of times I was totally guessing, right? I have no idea. Like, I feel pretty good right now, but if I go to Costco, I don't know, I might be out for 2 days. And you feel very powerless. You feel very much not in control and like a victim to your illness. But by tracking your steps and knowing what your budget is for the day and knowing how much things cost you, when he says, hey, do you want to go to Costco? I know it's going to cost me 500 to 1,000 steps if I go to Costco, depending on if we wander the whole store or if we just go get what we need, right? 500 to 1,000. And then I can look at my number of steps for the day. And if I'm already at 1,500, I know I have space. If 2,000 is my limit, I have space to go to Costco and just get the things we need, but I can't wander the whole store or that'll put me over, right? You see how this works? So you can look at where you're at with your step count. And if you know what things are costing, just like with your money, right? Looking at your bank account and seeing, can I afford this? Or will this mean we don't have money for food, right? Same thing with your steps, with your energy. You can choose to go over your steps. And there are times when that's worth it. There are times where that's the right decision, right? But there may also be times where the right decision is to say, you know what, I don't have energy for that today. Let's do that another day. By doing this, it puts you back in the driver's seat. It gives you control and it gives you a better idea of if you're going to have a flare or not. It gives you something objective to look at, not just what the heck happened this time. I don't know, right? It also gives you a way, speaking of which, right? It also gives you a way to go back and look when you have those moments of, oh, great, I'm in a flare. What the heck did I do this time? You can go back and look at your step count and you can go back and see, oh, wow, I really did 3 times as much walking 2 days ago when we went golfing and I was driving the golf cart, right? So it gives you a way to objectively look at that, which can also be really helpful. I know a lot of you have written in asking questions. How do I help my family understand? How do I help my husband understand? those types of things. These are numbers that you can share with them and see, when I do this, this is what happens. This is how many steps I feel good at. It would cost me this much. You can see why I can or can't do that, or why I might be asking for extra help, why I'm asking you to go to the grocery store without me, or whatever it might be. So that is the how you use it. And now I want to give you just a little bit of coaching around some of the things that I see with this. One of the things that comes up almost every time with each of my clients is all the thoughts and feelings and emotions when they look at their average number of steps. And part of the reason that I've shared some specific numbers with you on this podcast is I want you to know that whatever number you see there is probably very normal from a fibro perspective. It's totally okay. If you're less than 1,000 steps, that is okay. That's just reality. That is where you are. It does you no good to feel bad about reality. All you can do is decide you want to change it, right? So if you go back to our episode on goal setting, and I'm going to look up if I can do it here, I'm going to look up the episode number for you guys. Our goal setting episode was episode 27. So if you go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/27, you'll see that episode on habits and goal settings. And one of the things I talk about with goal setting is that your healing journey is a lot like a regular journey. I talk about this also in the podcast episode number 32. Where it's not about your illness, it's about your healing. We talk about this. If you're going on a journey, if I'm going from Seattle to New York, I need to know where I'm starting. The directions on how to get to New York are different if I'm coming from Seattle versus if I'm coming from Miami, right? We talked about that. So if you don't know the real number for what you really are doing every day, and if you don't know the real number for what makes you feel good and what is too much, then you're not going to be able to get better. We have to be honest about that. And you can't feel bad about it because it's just a fact. All the emotion, all the drama that we bring into it, that's where the pain is. That's where the emotional pain and agony is. And that's what keeps you from being able to do what you need to do to feel better. So no drama. It's just a number. And the point is where you're going to start, right? It's just like if you were losing weight, you have to know where you're starting so you know how you're progressing. If you're going to the gym and you're lifting weights, you got to know where you're starting so you know how you're progressing. It's not about where you start. It's about where you finish. It's about where you end up. It's not about your illness. It's about your healing. So don't feel bad about whatever number of steps that you're taking. It just is a fact, okay? And then start making decisions based on that reality. Don't try to increase your steps too quick. This is another thing I see a lot of people making a mistake of. Remember, it's not about using all of your energy every day, right? It's not about, I felt good at the end of the day. I could have done more. No. You're feeling good at the end of the day means your body has energy left to heal. So unless you are pain-free, unless you have all of the energy to do everything you want to do, you have got to let your body heal. And that means saving energy to let your body do that, okay? So those are the two big things that I see with my clients. One, all of the drama and emotion and thoughts around, the number of steps I can walk in a day. And number two, trying to increase too early. What will happen if you do this right, what will happen is saving that energy up, you will not have to try to do more steps. It will just naturally happen because you'll do things like get up and get your own glass of water instead of asking your husband to do it. Or you'll naturally look at the dishes that need to be done and you'll just do it yourself because you feel better, not because you're trying to get more steps in. So again, remember, we are not using this, we're not using activity trackers the same way the rest of the world does. This is our own special secret tool. You can also, if you're interested in more, if you are feeling better and you're at a place where you do want to increase your endurance, your capacity, you need to, exercise a little bit more, I do recommend going back and listening to the episode, the interview that I did with Megan Densmore. We do talk a lot about how to exercise with fibromyalgia, how to do it in a way where you're increasing gradually and not causing a flare-up for yourself. And that is episode 28. And I will have all the links to the episodes that I've mentioned in the show notes for today's episode. So just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/35 for today's episode, and we will have all of that there for you. I also want to just mention everything I've talked about today with tracking your steps and using an activity tracker or pedometer. I do talk about this in my first book, in Take Back Your Life. If you don't have a copy of that, I would love for you to grab a free download. If you go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/books, you will find free copies of both of my books. This part of tracking your steps to better manage your energy is in the book Take Back Your Life, in the chapter on how can I have more energy. So just go take a look at that and it'll give you a few more details. And as always, if you ever need any help with this, we would love to be able to help you. Sometimes it can be so hard to know, is this good? Is this bad? Am I doing the right thing? How do I make the decision on what to do next? It can be confusing. It can be hard to see the details of your own life while you're living it. That's why I always hire a coach when something's important to me, is because I need that outside perspective to help me know if I'm going in the right direction. So if you ever want to talk about how to better manage your energy, how you can have more energy, we would love to help you with that. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com and you'll see Find a Coach in the menu. There's lots of options out there, everything from working directly with me all the way through our certified fibromyalgia coaches, our student coaches, lots of options there for you. And you can request a consultation out there. All right. So I would love to hear from you guys as you start managing your energy by tracking your steps. I would love to know how that's working for you. You can send us some feedback or ask any questions at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. You'll see Ask the Coach in the menu, and that will send a message directly to me. Now, in upcoming episodes, next episode, I'm so excited, is actually going to come out on Fibromyalgia Awareness Day. So we are going to be doing some special things for that episode. And so please stay tuned for that. On May 12th, we'll have a special Awareness Day episode. And then after that episode, some of the things I've got lined up for you, an interview with the creators of the Recovery Love Box, which is a subscription service for those of us with chronic illness. It's awesome. Even right now in a pandemic, I get a care package once a month with all kinds of goodies. It's awesome. We'll have Liz on talking about that. I also am going to bring on a friend of mine, Sheila Whiteman, who is the author of To Pee or Not to Pee. And yes, that's pee with a P. It is all about urinary incontinence. And the main reason that I'm bringing her on is that I do hear from a lot of my clients, a lot of you out there with fibromyalgia are also dealing with bladder, digestive, bowel issues. There is a lot of things that you might be dealing with right now that you feel like is just part of your fibromyalgia or just part of getting old, right? The leaking a little when you sneeze or when you cough. That is not true. There is a lot that can be done about that. I have actually worked with Sheila over the last couple of months because I had her come to a class for my coaches and realized, oh, I was dealing with some of those things. And so I'm actually going to talk a little bit about my journey working with her and some of the things that were so easy to correct and things you don't actually have to live with as normal. So I hope you guys will stay tuned for that. Those are some of the episodes. And of course, we have our next Ask the Coach coming up in episode 40. So that will be coming up soon. If you guys have any specific questions you want to ask, I hope you'll send those in. It's just fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Look for Ask the Coach in the menu and you can send me your questions. And we can even do a live coaching session if that your question warrants that. So stay tuned. I can't wait to see you guys in 2 weeks when it is Awareness Day to celebrate with you. And in the meantime, stay safe and stay healthy out there and play with your activity trackers and start managing your energy better. All right, you guys. Bye.